And this is my time and space machine, TARDIS.
A 1965 translation of Doctor Who to the big screen proved to be successful enough to warrant a sequel. It was more ambitious, but audiences at the time were not as receptive, like Bob Dylan plugging in his guitar for the first time. Except here, the audience just threw half-sucked boiled lollies at the screen. Gee, I pity the poor bastard who has to get up on the ladder to unstick them.
Most unlikely, don't you think?
Daleks Invasion Earth, 2150 AD.
Do you know what they're doing?
Yes.
Doctor Who and the Daleks was a reasonable hit with its target audience in the UK, kids on school holidays. That movie hit just as the wave of Dalek mania was peaking, and so a sequel was put into production for release in the summer of 1966. Amicus had originally purchased the story rights for 3 Dalek films from writer Terry Nation for £500, which was a decent chunk of change back in the day, though today would barely get you a 2007 Vauxhall Corsa diesel with 150,000 miles on the clock. In this context, £500 for the rights to 3 stories just sounds a bit weird.
So I tell you what, we'll call it 500 nicker and throw in the sequels for free.
And what are you going to do with us?
Whether or not you'll enjoy this is hard to say because your mileage may vary. Some love it, some don't. On television, the second Dalek serial was a 6-part story known collectively as The Dalek Invasion of Earth, where the Daleks have invaded Earth in the future. It was overly ambitious for the television series at the time, and does come off as a rather sloppy production, like when 5-year-olds try to make mojitos for Mother's Day brunch.
Oh, yes. Highly advanced.
For the second cinematic outing, producers Milton Subotsky and Max J. Rosenberg increased the film's budget and scope to make an even bigger and better sequel. Well, a bigger sequel.
Attack the Daleks! This order cannot be countermanded!
They do say strike while the iron was hot, but with the second Doctor Who movie, it was hard to time things right because by the time the film was released, the iron had cooled to the point where it wouldn't trouble cold butter. The television series Doctor Who became super popular in Britain because of the Daleks, and so the producers of that show were using the Daleks an awful lot by this point. Perhaps viewers had just had their fill.
TARDIS took us by accident to the Dalek planet Skaro, but perhaps ever sometime in the future.
A late-night raid on a jeweller sees Tom, a policeman on patrol, getting coshed on the head by some crooks. He tries to call for backup, only to find that the police box was in fact a time machine. Look, weird things happen in phone booths all the time. There was this one time I remember I was visiting Metropolis on holiday and I really needed to use the phone booth. And after I finished relieving myself, I found some guy's soggy suit and spectacles on the floor.
I am Doctor Who. This is my niece Louise and my granddaughter Susan.
On board are inventor Doctor Who, his niece Louise, and genius granddaughter Susan. Tom's entered just as they were departing, where they arrive in London in the year 2150 AD.
Maybe it's Sunday.
Of course it's not Sunday, I'm playing football, Sunday.
The place is in ruins, but it takes them a while to twig that something's wrong. TARDIS is covered by some falling debris, and the men are separated from the girls.
It's a flying saucer.
Yes, it's a very apt description.
Doctor Who and Tom are captured by the cyborg henchmen of the Daleks. That's the Robomen.
Daleks?
It seems as though the Doctor and company have accidentally stumbled onto a Dalek Invasion of Earth. That's a very catchy title. Susan and Louise find some of the local resistance who plan to attack the Dalek saucer.
The Daleks?
They strike just as the Doctor and Tom were to be turned into Robomen, or maybe they were just getting a blow dry. But everyone gets mixed up. Tom and Louise hide out on board the Dalek ship. Susan and the gruff resistance fighter Wyler go off in search of Doctor Who. Oh man, it's never going to be not weird to call him that. And Doctor Who himself and David head towards Bedford, where the Daleks have a mining operation to extract the planet's magnetic core, install an engine, and use the planet as an enormous spaceship. Okay, the science here is about as sound as using chili sauce as a substitute for eye drops.
Some insane idea of piloting the planet and using it like a giant spaceship.
After everyone's met up at the mine, they all hatch a plan to sabotage a Dalek bomb which will, somewhere along the lines, expose the Daleks to intense magnetic force which will all suck them into a black hole. It's at this point that some viewers still watching may have envied the Daleks. This did improve on the ending to the television series, making it A, more visual, B, noisier, and C,
Hang on, that's a toy, isn't it?
Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD had a bigger budget and more ambitious plot than the first movie, yet doesn't quite work as well.
We have to bypass Watford. The place is full of Daleks.
There are numerous changes from the television version, but none of those really hamper the film. The same story beats are there. Various pairs of characters leave a ruined London and head for the Dalek mines in Bedford, but the character combinations have been mixed up somewhat. The same things happen, just in a heavily condensed fashion, and to different pairings. Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD looks a hell of a lot better than what was on TV at the time. The Dalek saucer is impressive, wires aside, and the scenes set in a ruined London have genuine atmosphere. But then you have some curiously wobbly camera work in some scenes in the Dalek control room, and then there are some model scenes where a relatively expensive feature film was shown up by the likes of Jerry Anderson's television productions of the time.
For space knows no boundaries, and it's completely timeless. Yeah, I'm sure that's made it perfectly clear, eh?
Peter Cushing was apparently ill at the time, and so the Doctor does much less in the second film. His performance is roughly the same, though there's slightly less playfulness, a little less twinkliness. Rovert Tovey as Susan was the only other returning cast member.
It's coming closer!
And there's one little change from the television version involving her character. Because on television, Susan fell in love with Resistance fighter David and elected to stay with him. With a much younger Susan, that may have been somewhat awkward.
Everything's still. The saucer's landed.
Instead of Barbara, we have the Doctor's niece, Louise, played by Jill Curzon, who does seem to be rather uncomfortable in the role, with her dialogue being cut to an absolute minimum.
I don't know what you're all up to. I ought to report you for this. 2150.
The real strength of the movie is Bernard Cribbins. Yes, Wilf. He's there for the comic relief and the heroic physical stuff, and he was there because he was somewhat more relatable than a doddering inventor or a child genius. As with the first film, the casting was with purpose, aiming at specific demographics before the term had become common in the entertainment industry.
Speak quickly!
There were an awful lot of similar low to mid-budget adventure films at the time. They often had a professor type, a glamorous girl, a heroic younger man. Sometimes they had a kid, where they were always on some journey to somewhere exotic. Always with a really grandiose movie poster, which the final movie could in no way live up to.
But that's impossible.
There's the stuff you remember, like Journey to the Centre of the Earth or The Lost World, and of course the 2 Doctor Who films. But there were also many lesser-seen entries in the genre, such as Languid Stroll to the Middle of Nowhere, Bus Ride to Hull, and of course my favourite, Trip to Asda. There are moments of darkness if you look. The Robomen seem slightly terrifying, but then we have these moments of utter silliness of Robomen eating from an automated food machine. I do, however, think we should be awfully thankful that there's not a follow-up scene set a few hours later when the Robomen line up for the Excretomatic 5000. Philip Maddock plays a nasty mercenary who of course gets his just desserts, and for just desserts, read frostbite from a phalanx of fire extinguishers. The Daleks only exterminated one person in the first film, but here they just go nuts, putting out fires all over the place. Improved effects and production values aside, it still feels a fairly slight film. The film's budget was increased significantly, even if a lot of that increase was slated for marketing. A deal with a British breakfast cereal manufacturer meant that even in the ruins of London in 2150 AD, advertisers were still able to put up posters for Sugar Puffs. And just to confuse fans who might obsess over such details, the film refers to the main character as both Doctor Who
I am Doctor Who.
and the Doctor.
I've got a comb here, Doctor.
Yes, I believe that will do the trick nicely.
I do not obsess over minor details over things like that, like was the Battle of Waterloo named after the train station? Were the Bee Gees the greatest death metal group ever? And which NFL teams played in the Dust Bowl?
I do not understand it.
The design of the Dalek ship, both the interior and exterior, is, like Ned Kelly, well executed. The designs for the Dalek control room were also far beyond anything the TV could offer, though both could do wobbly camera moves equally as poorly. The interior of the TARDIS has been spruced up a little, looking a tad more high-tech, and less like something you would see on Hoarders. The special effects, while they are more ambitious, can also be variable. The Robomen have giant light-up guns with ergonomics that scream chronic back pain. The Robomen are a step up from the TV version. They are now a PVC fetishist's dream. Like the previous film and many other films of the late 60s, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD used the Techniscope process, which is basically a cheaper alternative to anamorphic widescreen. As we described in our look at the Thunderbirds features of the 60s, Techniscope uses standard film and lenses, but a modified camera which captures 2 ultra-wide frames onto one standard frame of 35mm film. You need less raw film stock to make the movie, but at the cost of picture quality. Techniscope is that cheapskate uncle who keeps giving you the same Old Spice gift pack for Christmas that you've given him for the last 16 birthdays. I really should give it a wipe down before next year. Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD has a problem in that much of the time, especially when compared to the first film, it doesn't seem like too many people's hearts were in it. In fact, the film really doesn't seem to excite anyone all that much. There's just some feeling that despite the increased scope, that it's not particularly exciting. When it was released in the summer of 1966, the film did not do anywhere near as well as the first movie, critically or financially. The reasons are a little unclear. Maybe it was because of the film itself, or that interest in the Daleks in general was waning, or because kids were sated after the BBC had broadcast a mammoth 12-part Dalek story over a period of 3 months the previous winter. So by the middle of 1966, it does seem as though the Daleks' popularity had waned.
You will be robotized!
The film's legacy is one of,
oh, they made Doctor Who movies in the 60s.
Even people who have seen Doctor Who and the Daleks may have been surprised that this film ever existed. I know I would see the first film in the video library and occasionally repeat it on television on a Sunday afternoon, but it was many years before I learned that Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD even existed, and several more years before I was ever able to watch it. There was something like 19 Dalek props used for the film, some refurbished from the first movie, some borrowed from a 1965 stage play. Some of the movie props would make it into the TV show at various points. Though, if that's what you're looking for, there are far more exhaustive research efforts if that's your bag. We on this channel are less about exhaustive research and more about singing Daleks.
Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. I've been inclined to believe they never would.
The film's music by Bill McGuffey is a mix of jazzy numbers with some more dramatic melodies. The opening credits feature some swirly patterns reminiscent of the opening titles of the TV show, set to an energetic theme tune. It's all decent enough, but during the film, the dramatic Roboman theme is so on the nose that I had to spritz out the television speakers with some aftershave that I was hoping to re-gift to Uncle Jack. Thunderbird's composer Barry Gray again provided some electronic elements for the film's soundtrack. There are people who will prefer the first movie, like myself. There will be others who enjoy the larger scale of the second movie. There will be people who just prefer the television version, and others still who cannot abide the Doctor Who movies of the 60s at all. If you put all of these people in a room and ask them to vote, Luxembourg will still end up with nul points.
A lot of well-informed guesswork, I should say.
Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD is a curiosity. It does some things much better than the TV version. It does some things better than the first film, yet I just can't muster up as much enthusiasm for it. Like an affordable apartment in London, it's a little flat. It's definitely one for any fan of Doctor Who wants to see absolutely everything they can. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.